Hi, I'm Delara. My parents invited me over one evening, said it was a family dinner, but halfway through dessert, they told me they were handing my house, the house I paid for, over to my sister. The golden daughter, they called her. They thought I wouldn't say anything. They thought I'd stay quiet, like I always had. But what they didn't know was I kept the receipts. Literally. Why did they need me to build it, only to pretend I never lived there? And if they were willing to erase me that easily, what else were they hiding? Stay with me. This story doesn't end where they thought it would. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, half focused on a project render glowing on my laptop screen, when Mom's text came in. No emojis, no voice notes, just 10 clean words that sat on my screen like they'd been rehearsed. Family dinner. We want everyone together. It's important. Come home. I stared at it for a few seconds too long. It wasn't the wording that got me. It was the tone, formal, neutral, not the usual passive-aggressive, "We haven't seen you in forever, guess you're too busy for us," kind of message. No guilt, no drama, just, wait. I reread it twice more. Come home. I'd been living in this house for almost 8 years now. Modest, yes, but I'd made it mine. The hardwoods? I refinished them myself. The crown molding in the dining room? Me? The sage green walls in the kitchen? Picked that color when I needed something soothing after a particularly rough year at work. Every part of this house had a little piece of my story carved into it. But come home didn't mean this house. It meant theirs. Lexington was less than an hour's drive, yet it always felt like crossing into enemy lines. Still, something in me stirred. Not curiosity, not hope. Just that old reflex from being the daughter who never showed up angry. Just showed up. I put on jeans, a clean sweater, and drove without music. The moment I pulled into their driveway, I knew I'd made a mistake. The front porch was lined with potted mums that hadn't been there last week. The windows were lit with the glow of candles, the kind Mom only pulled out for company she wanted to impress. Inside, everything felt off. Staged. The dining table was already set, cloth napkins folded like swans. A full spread of lasagna, garlic knots, Caesar salad, even red wine, my favorite, was waiting. Iris, my mother, was in pearls and lipstick. She never wore lipstick unless she was performing or delivering bad news. Orlin, my father, nodded at me as I walked in. No hug, no, "How have you been?" Just a nod and a glance toward the dining room, like I was late to something I hadn't signed up for. And Maelis, my sister, was already seated. Her hair perfect, her nails fresh, her wine glass half full. "Oh, good," she said, lifting her glass. "We were just saying how quiet the house felt before you walked in." That was her version of humor, and her version of a welcome. We sat. We passed the bread. We made shallow small talk about weather, traffic, work. No one asked about the house I'd been living in. This house, the one they'd let me stay in, when they needed help covering the mortgage. As I bit into my second forkful of lasagna, the air shifted. Mom straightened in her seat, a smile too stiff to be real. "We've made a decision," she said, placing her wine glass down with a gentle clink. "Your father and I, about the house." I lowered my fork. My stomach was still full of pasta, but suddenly it felt cold. Orlan cleared his throat. "It's time to make things official. We've decided to transfer the house to Maelis." I blinked. The fork in my hand stilled mid-air. Maelis tilted her head, her smile soft and patronizing. "It just makes sense," she said. "You're always on the move, working on one project or another. I'm settled, stable. It's just easier this way." I didn't respond. I couldn't. It was as if my ears had gone underwater, muffled and slow. This house, my home, was being handed over like a gift basket. Nobody asked if I was okay with it. Nobody mentioned the years I'd paid down the mortgage, funded the roof repairs, painted the walls, replaced the plumbing, handled the insurance. Not a word. It was already done. I looked at my mother. She smiled like she was proud of herself. I looked at my father. His eyes stayed on the salad bowl, like he couldn't bear to meet mine. And then I looked at Malus, who took another delicate sip of wine and said almost sweetly, "Of course, you're welcome to stay through the holidays." I smiled. Small. Cold. "No worries," I said. "I'm not that hungry anymore." I stood, walked into the hallway, picked up my coat. I could feel all three of them watching me, but no one said a word. The front door clicked behind me. The cool air outside brushed against my face, clearing the fog. As I got into my car and started the engine, I stared at the steering wheel for a long beat. Then I said it out loud, barely above a whisper. I guess I was never really part of their picture anyway. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had slipped into that muted gray that tells you the evening's going to be longer than it looks. I didn't go straight inside. I sat in the car, letting the engine hum beneath me, letting the silence stretch. It was the kind of quiet that felt like a decision. I finally stepped out and walked up to the front door, unlocking it with muscle memory more than awareness. The air inside was still, settled, everything exactly where I'd left it. And yet, nothing felt familiar anymore. I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry, either. I just laid on the couch, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling and letting the patterns in the plaster drift my thoughts to places I hadn't visited in years. That table, that smile, that sentence. "We're transferring the house to Milas." It replayed in a loop, except each time, it landed heavier. The next morning, sunlight forced its way through the blinds like it was determined to wake me up, whether I liked it or not. I got up slowly, made coffee, and tried to shake the weight off my shoulders. It clung like wet wool. Around 10, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the peephole, and of course, it was Malus, holding 2 cups of coffee and that smile she wore when she knew she was stepping on your neck, but expected you to thank her for the massage. I opened the door halfway. "Didn't know you were coming. I figured you might need this," she said, holding up one of the cups. "Rough night?" I didn't answer, just took the coffee out of her hand and stepped aside. She walked in like she owned the place. No hesitation. Sat down on the edge of my sofa and looked around like she was already redecorating in her head. "I get that this is a lot," she began, adjusting the throw pillow behind her back. "Change can feel abrupt, but this doesn't have to be hard." I stayed standing. "Hard?" "I just mean, transitions. They're tough. I'm not here to make it worse. You can stay here for now, of course, until you figure things out." The nerve of that sentence landed like a slap. "Figure things out," I repeated, not a question, just letting the words hang between us like damp laundry. She took a sip of her drink, then added, "I mean, obviously we'll need to make some arrangements eventually, but there's no rush. You've got time." I nodded once, walked to the kitchen, and set the coffee down. My hand was shaking slightly, not from nerves, but from restraint. She stayed 10 minutes longer than necessary, made some vague offer to help clean out the back room, then floated out with a cheery, "Let me know if you need anything." As the door closed behind her, I exhaled through my nose. Not a sigh. A warning. Around 4 that afternoon, my phone rang. Mom. I debated not answering, but I did. She didn't even say hello. "I hope Milas was helpful today," she began. "She stopped by," I said, voice flat. "She just wants the best for you. You know how she is." I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the row of framed photos on the wall. Every one of them, Christmas, birthdays, summer barbecues, had one thing in common. I wasn't in them. Or if I was in the corner, cropped out, holding the camera. Mom's voice softened, but her words didn't. "You've been allowed to live there for so long. We just thought it was time to let someone with real commitment manage it." "Real commitment," I echoed, biting the inside of my cheek. "We didn't want it to be a shock," she added, like yesterday hadn't been an ambush dressed in marinara and table manners. "So," I said slowly, "just to be clear, Nothing I did for this house counts? There was a pause. One beat too long. It's not about that, she said finally. You helped, yes. But the house was never yours. It's ours. Always has been. The floor under me didn't move, but it felt like the world tilted. Got it, I said, my voice calm but clipped. That's helpful. At least now I don't have to guess. I ended the call before she could respond, set the phone down gently, then walked to the file cabinet in the corner of my office. My fingers moved through the folders like they knew where to go before I did. I pulled out the thick tan envelope, unsealed it, and laid the contents on my desk. Mortgage agreements, signed transfer of ownership, tax statements, all with my name, my signature, no guessing needed. I stayed seated at the desk for a while, not moving, not even blinking much. The envelope lay open, its contents spread like pieces of a forgotten puzzle that had never belonged to them in the first place. The documents weren't just paper, they were proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined my contributions. Proof that my name had once mattered, even if they'd done their best to erase it. The irony was cruel. All this time, I'd believed they simply overlooked me. But looking back now, they knew. They just counted on me never digging deep enough to confront it. I got up, moved slowly through the house, and opened the cabinet in my bedroom, where I'd stashed the backup files, scanned copies of everything, digitized for safekeeping. At the time, it felt like overkill. Now, it felt like the only armor I had left. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the files. There it was again. My name, not once, but across every page. Loan approvals, utility transfers, renovation contracts. Line after line of my signature, dates I remembered vividly. One in particular stood out. The spring I canceled my trip to Oregon because the roof needed to be replaced and no one else could handle it. I'd convinced myself it was part of being the reliable one, the capable daughter, the one who didn't make a fuss. Not anymore. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Jenna, an old friend from college I hadn't spoken to in months. No context, just a link and 3 words. Is this you? I tapped it open and was met with a screenshot of a Facebook post. Public. From my mother's account. Some people forget who gave them everything, and now they're trying to take what's not theirs. Underneath, the comments were filled with people chiming in like they were part of the family. Ungrateful kids are the worst. She should be thankful she had a place to stay. You raised her too soft, Iris. That's why she acts like this. I blinked, then stared, not at the post, at the weight of those words. It wasn't just that they'd taken credit. It was the deliberate way they were painting me as the villain. Like I was trying to steal something that was never mine, when all along, I was the one who made sure it didn't collapse. I didn't respond. I didn't type. I didn't react. Instead, I attached the scanned deed to an email, subject line blank. In the body, I typed one sentence. Please review for action if necessary. No rush, yet. I clicked send to my attorney, a man I'd worked with once during a contractor dispute. Practical, professional, no fluff. Just the kind of person you needed when the people who hurt you claimed it was for your own good. Once the email was out, I closed the laptop. Then I stood, walked over to the small drawer in the hallway, and pulled out a single white candle. I lit it, not for ambiance, not for peace, but because I needed the room to be filled with something I had chosen. I sat in the quiet, the flame flickering beside me, and let my thoughts wander. Not to the past, but forward. What came next? What I would and wouldn't allow. What I might have to do if they pushed again. Another vibration on the counter snapped me back. I expected more fallout. Maybe a call, maybe a message demanding to know why I hadn't responded to the online parade of lies. But it wasn't that. It was a digital invitation, a home celebration, hosted by Malis, at my address. No RSVP required. I didn't delete the invitation. I didn't answer it either. I just stared at the screen for a while, rereading the header like maybe I'd misunderstood the location. But no, it was my address. The same house I'd been paying for, maintaining, rebuilding. The one they called theirs. Now, apparently, Milas's, if you went by tone. I scrolled further. There was a list of attendees, friends of the family, distant cousins, even two of Melis's real estate clients. Not once did I see my name. But I did see Iris had left a public comment beneath the event post. "You're all welcome. We're proud to honor Melis for her grace and leadership in shaping our family home." I should have been angry, but what I felt was thinner, sharper, not rage, just a clean, cold edge of detachment. The next morning, I got up early. Needed air. I took a long walk through the neighborhood, earbuds in, but no music playing. Just noise to keep people from talking to me. By the time I looped back around the block, cars had already begun pulling up. Silver sedans, SUVs, a rental BMW. One woman in heels was holding a hostess gift wrapped in gold cellophane. They were early. I hadn't expected early. I ducked down the alley and came in through the back. I'd left the side gate unlocked the night before. A habit. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew I'd need an exit that didn't involve smiling at strangers. Inside, my house was full of voices. The kitchen island had been cleared, repurposed as a buffet. My serving trays were laid out like museum pieces. The lemon pitcher I'd bought from a local artisan at the summer fair sat beside a stack of flutes filled with cheap champagne. I stayed just out of sight, behind the hallway corner near the base of the stairs. From there, I could see into the dining room. Melis stood at the head of the table, glowing. She wore a cream blouse, wide-legged slacks, and that effortless expression she reserved for open houses and fundraising galas. Iris stood next to her, glass raised. "Thank you all for coming," she began, beaming. "This home has seen many seasons, but it's never looked more alive than it does now. And that's all thanks to Melis. Her taste, her eye for detail, it brought this place back to life." Applause. I didn't clap. I didn't move. Because the walls they were admiring, I painted those. The tile backsplash everyone kept complimenting, I designed it from scratch after spending 3 weekends in tile showrooms comparing grout samples. Even the lighting fixtures, hand-picked, rewired, installed by me, now belonged to someone else's story. "You can really feel Melis's touch in every corner," someone said. I leaned my shoulder against the wall to steady myself. This wasn't about the house anymore. This was about memory, rewritten, reassigned. I slipped upstairs while the crowd migrated toward the patio. In my room, the room that used to be mine, I grabbed a denim jacket, shoved my keys into my pocket, and left the way I came in. By the time I reached the end of the block, my phone vibrated. A message from Iris. "You're welcome to stop by, you know. Just don't make it a scene. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just instruction." That evening, just before dusk, my phone rang again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Dilara," Mom said, in that voice she used when she wanted to sound calm but in control. "Let's not drag this out." "Drag what out?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The house situation. Honey, let's just make it simple. Sign the papers. Let Melis take over what she's built." I almost laughed, but I didn't. "You mean what I built?" I replied evenly. "What she's now claiming as hers." "She's the one maintaining it. She's here. You're always off somewhere. This is better for everyone. If you care about this family, you'll stop making everything so hard." That last sentence sat there like a dare. And I took it. "If caring means erasing myself, I don't," I said. Then hung up. I didn't wait for a reply, didn't expect one. Instead, I opened my laptop, downloaded the video footage from the hallway security camera. Quiet, clear, time-stamped. Every face, every compliment, every claim. Then I opened my email and clicked forward. To my lawyer, the footage, the deed, just in case anyone forgot. I closed the laptop slowly, like I didn't want the moment to end too abruptly. The screen dimmed to black, and for a second, I just stared at my own faint reflection. My face didn't look angry. It didn't even look tired. It looked still. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm, but this time, I was the one holding the wind. 3 days passed without a single word from any of them. No texts, no calls, not even one of those veiled Facebook updates Iris liked to post when she was nursing public outrage. I took the silence for what it was. Tension. Strategic waiting. They weren't ignoring me. They were circling, recalculating, seeing what I'd do next. On the 4th morning, my phone rang. Mayless. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring once, twice. Then I picked up and didn't say a word. I assume, in a name they assumed I was too meek to defend. I ended the call without another word. That evening, the sun dipped low over the edge of the backyard fence, casting long lines across the tile floor in the kitchen. I opened the closet in my home office and pulled out the black fireproof box I hadn't touched in a while. The lock clicked open with a satisfying snap. Inside, every receipt, every scanned form, original deed, title transfer, contractor invoices, closing disclosures. The real weight wasn't in the paper, it was in the consistency. My name, over and over again, like I'd been trying to remind myself I mattered, even when they wouldn't say it out loud. I took photos of everything and organized the files into a clean folder on my desktop. Then I opened a new email. Subject line, activate. Body. Plesh said smoothly, "You've accepted the new arrangement." There it was. No greeting, no apology, no trace of regret. I held the phone against my ear and let the pause stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. "I haven't decided what I accept," I said flatly, "but I know exactly what I won't tolerate anymore." She scoffed lightly, the way someone does when they think they still have leverage. "Dilara, you're being unreasonable. It's not that deep. It's just real estate." That's what they always reduced it to. Not a home, not years of quiet giving. Just bricks and contracts. Ace, proceed with protections as discussed. Let me know if you need anything further. Attached were 24 files. I hit send and closed the laptop. I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. But I felt the shift. That night, while the rest of the street was winding down, I worked my way through the house. Slowly, quietly. I changed the locks, front, back, and side doors. The garage code, too. The mailbox had Melis's last name taped over mine. Likely her doing, trying to brand what wasn't hers. I peeled it off and dropped it in the trash. Then I made a trip to the post office the next morning and revoked every forwarding instruction. Every assumption they'd made was unraveling now, and I didn't tell a soul. That afternoon, I took a drive to clear my head, stopped for groceries, bought a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a someday. I figured now was as good a day as any to start claiming the somedays. When I returned, the first sign that things were shifting landed hard. A text from Melis. "Hey, why are my keys not working?" I left it unread. Less than an hour later, a voicemail from Iris. "Is this really what you're doing now? Locking out your family? Are you serious? After everything we've done for you?" I forwarded the message to my attorney and left it at that. By the time the evening settled, the house felt like it had finally expelled the ghost of being borrowed. It no longer echoed with expectation. The silence was clean. Earned. The new locks clicked shut behind me for the final time. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the front window, and took the first full breath I'd had in weeks. Then, just as I raised the glass to my lips, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, and there she was. Iris. She wasn't holding flowers, not a pie, not even a peace offering, just a single piece of printer paper, folded in half, pressed tightly against her chest. I opened the door just enough to make it clear she wasn't coming in. Iris didn't ask. She didn't even glance inside. She handed me the folded sheet like it was a subpoena, not a conversation starter. I took it without a word. Her hand lingered for a half second too long before she pulled it back like I might burn her. "I just thought you should see what everyone else is seeing," she said. Then she turned and left. No explanation, no eye contact. Just walked back to her car, shut the door, and drove off like she'd finished a chore. I closed the door behind me and unfolded the paper. It was a screenshot, printed, not emailed, of a Facebook post. Hers. Public. It's heartbreaking when your own child disrespects everything you've built for them. Some people forget who carried them through life. Some betrayals come wearing quiet faces. Underneath her words was a photo. My kitchen, my dining room, and in the center of the frame, smiling like she was queen of the manor, Malis, glass of wine in hand. Behind her, Iris with one arm draped over her shoulder, like they'd built the walls together. The comments were worse than the caption. "Ungrateful generation. She looks just like you, Iris. Grace must run in the family. I always thought the younger one seemed cold. You could just tell." I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the printout. The irony? I wasn't tagged, just mentioned. Enough to invite attention. Enough for people to guess. But not enough to hold her legally accountable. This was calculated. She wasn't venting. She was shaping a narrative, one where I was the villain, and they were the injured saints just trying to keep the family whole. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I stood up, walked into the office, and started severing every last tie I hadn't already cut. I logged into the utilities portal and removed myself from the shared water account. Electricity next. Internet. Insurance. All gone. One by one. Every joint signature. Every name I'd allowed to linger out of guilt or habit. I deleted them like weeds. Then I pulled up my bank account and scanned for anything unusual. Something caught my eye. A recurring transfer from 2 years ago. A payment to a local roofing contractor. I remembered the roof getting done, but I'd never approved that job, and I certainly hadn't signed anything. The invoice was still on file in their customer portal. I downloaded it. Customer, Delara Holloway. Deposit, paid. Balance, overdue. I called the contractor directly. "This is Delara Holloway. I have a billing question." The voice on the other end was friendly. Too friendly. "Oh, sure, Ms. Holloway. We were wondering when we'd hear from you again. We finished that project a while back. We were told you were handling the rest." "I never ordered the work," I said calmly. "I never even spoke to anyone from your office." There was a pause. Then shuffling. "Well, your mother called on your behalf. She said you were covering the costs, and she transferred the deposit from your joint family account." I closed my eyes for a beat. Not long enough to let it sink, just long enough to suppress the rush of heat climbing up my spine. "Please send me a copy of the signed authorization," I said. "I need to review exactly what's on file." "Of course," I thanked him, hung up, and opened a new message. To my attorney. Subject, roof invoice. Body. This was done under my name, without my consent. If they keep pushing this in public, I'll respond, with documentation, every single time. Attached, the invoice, the transfer confirmation, screenshots of the portal history. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't post anything in response to the Facebook hit job. I didn't send a single text. Instead, I turned off my phone, lit a candle in the kitchen, and let the silence tell me exactly who I was becoming. Not the girl who kept her mouth shut to keep the peace. Not the daughter who absorbed disrespect, because that's just how family is. Not the woman who let other people tell her what she owed. Later that night, as I was about to shut the blinds, I noticed something white on the porch floor. I opened the door and picked it up. A crisp envelope. No stamp. No address. Just my name. Written in thick gold ink. Inside, a formal invitation card. "You are cordially invited to our home appreciation ceremony, hosted by Malis Holloway. Saturday, 2 p.m. Light refreshments provided." The location? My house. I stared at the invitation for a long moment. The cardstock was thick, expensive. the kind you'd use for weddings or fundraisers. My name, spelled correctly for once, shimmered in that tacky gold ink. I didn't need to guess who ordered it. They weren't just hosting a party, they were making a statement, on paper, in my house. I placed the card on the counter, turned on the faucet, and let the water run until it steamed. I watched the stream for almost a minute before turning it off and drying my hands on the same dish towel I'd used for years. The routine grounded me. I knew what they were trying to do, and I wasn't going to let them see me unravel. Saturday came too fast. By noon, I had already seen 4 cars pull up. SUVs, mostly. Clean and shiny, like they'd been washed that morning. I noticed Malus had taken the liberty of hanging a welcome banner across the front porch, beige with metallic lettering, just subtle enough to avoid embarrassment, but bold enough to be deliberate. I didn't want to be there, but I needed to be. I dressed in jeans and a black sweater. Neutral. Simple. I tied my hair back and slipped on shoes that didn't make noise on the hardwood. Then I waited for the right moment to step in, just long enough for the introductions to be over, but before the speeches began. The crowd had already gathered by the time I eased the side door open. I stepped inside quietly and stood near the hallway arch, halfway between the living room and the kitchen. I stayed out of view, but close enough to hear every word. Iris stood in front of the fireplace, my fireplace, and tapped her glass with a spoon. The murmur in the room settled instantly. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice sweetened with that performative warmth I knew too well. This home has meant so much to our family. And in the last few years, it's become even more special thanks to Maylise. She gestured to her left. Maylise stepped forward with that practiced, humble chic smile she wore at open houses and networking brunches. "She's the reason this space feels whole again," Iris continued, her taste, her commitment, her heart. "Every corner of this house reflects her strength and vision." Polite applause followed. A woman in a silk blouse whispered, "She deserves it after all her work." Another voice chimed in, "I always knew she was the one holding things together." I glanced toward the dining area. The same built-ins I'd designed, the hand-painted tiles I'd driven across state lines to pick up. Every detail they praised had come from my hands, my choices, my checkbook. But none of that was mentioned. Maylise took the floor and smiled modestly. "I just wanted to make the house feel more like home. That's all I ever wanted, to take what we had and make it beautiful." I felt a presence move beside me. A man in a dark navy suit, clean-shaven and calm, stepped forward. My attorney. He said nothing to me, just gave a small nod, then walked straight into the room like he'd been invited. Excuse me," he said, his voice firm but not raised. "Apologies for the interruption, but before this event continues, I'm required to make a legal clarification." Iris blinked. Mylis's smile faded just slightly. "This property," he continued, holding a manila folder, "is solely and legally owned by Ms. Delara Holloway. All records, tax documents, and deed filings list her as the sole title holder. Any references or implications of ownership outside of that are legally incorrect and may be subject to misrepresentation." The silence was instant. One man set his glass down. A woman shifted in her heels. Maylise didn't speak. Iris opened her mouth like she might, but nothing came out. I stepped forward then. Not to gloat, not to argue, just to be seen. I looked first at Maylise, then at my mother. Neither could meet my eyes for long. I said one thing. "I never left this house. You just stopped seeing me in it." Then I turned and walked out the front door, my attorney following behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The truth had already been planted like a flag in the middle of the room. By the time I got home, my real home, the sun had slipped lower, casting a honeyed light across the living room floor. I pulled the curtains open and let it in. No shadows, no pretending. I brewed a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and drank it slowly, finally at peace with the silence, because this time, the quiet belonged to me. Sunday morning was quiet in the way only a post-battlefield could be. I moved through my home slowly, barefoot, touching the furniture like it had just returned from war. Everything was exactly where it had been, but nothing felt borrowed anymore. In the living room, a napkin was crumpled on the floor near the coffee table. I picked it up, smoothed it without thinking, and tossed it in the bin. There were still a few plastic cups left in the sink from the event. I rinsed them out and stacked them neatly, one final cleanup that didn't belong to me. I found a handbag tucked behind the armchair. I didn't open it, just placed it on the porch with a note. Left behind, come get it if it's yours. I didn't sign it. After that, the house felt like mine again. Not just legally, emotionally. It didn't echo with accusation anymore. It held stillness, like a breath finally let go. By mid-afternoon, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, pen in hand. I hadn't planned to write anything, but the words came easily. Not long, just true, I understand now. You didn't want me invisible, you wanted me useful, I forgive you. But I won't forget. I didn't put my name, just an initial, D, folded the note in half and slid it inside a plain card with no image, no color. It felt right. Simple, unsentimental. On the way to drop it off, I didn't hesitate. I parked in front of their house, walked straight to the mailbox, and placed the card inside. No knock, no waiting, no second thoughts. When I got home, I made tea and took it out to the front steps. It was colder than I expected, so I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat with the mug in my hands. About an hour passed before my phone vibrated. A message from Melis. You didn't have to humiliate everyone like that. We could have handled it as family. I stared at the screen for a few moments, then blocked her number. No reply, no explanation, no rage. Just done. She wasn't upset about the truth. She was upset it wasn't hers to tell. That night, I turned off all the lights and lit the candle in the hallway, the same one I'd used the night I decided to stop being quiet. I sat on the porch again. The neighborhood had begun to shift into the season. Lights appeared on porch rails, wreaths on doors. You could feel December creeping in, one cold gust at a time. Across the street, Mrs. Platt was putting up an inflatable snowman in her front yard, and her son was helping her secure the base with string. She waved when she caught me watching, and I waved back. I sent one message before bed. To Camille. Thanks for reminding me I could choose myself. I should have done it sooner. Her reply came 10 minutes later. You chose right on time. The next morning, as I opened the front door to grab the newspaper, I noticed another envelope on the doormat. This one wasn't from them. It was thinner, neatly sealed, with my name written in small, even handwriting. I knew it was from Camille before I even picked it up. I brought it inside and sat down on the edge of the couch before opening it. Inside was a single photograph, slightly faded but well kept. I recognized the image before I could fully process it. 10 years ago. A family cookout. The only picture where I was at the center. Camille must have taken it. I was laughing, holding a plate of ribs, standing between my mother and Melis, both looking towards something else, someone else. But I was looking straight at the camera, not posing, just present. And for once, the photo didn't feel like a memory I had to chase. It felt like proof that, even back then, I had always been part of the story. They just chose to frame it without me. I traced my fingers lightly over the edges of the photo, not to hold on, just to remind myself I was there. I had always been there. Camille's handwriting on the back was faint but firm. You were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to be. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hit me, but because it landed somewhere too deep for tears. It was the kind of truth that didn't sting. It soothed. I folded the photo carefully, set it aside, and got up to make coffee. 10 minutes later, Camille was at my door. She didn't knock. She didn't say anything. just held up a to-go cup with a quiet smile. I opened the door wide enough for her to come in. She handed me the coffee, then followed me to the porch, where we sat in the two old chairs I'd almost thrown out last spring. We didn't speak for a while, just listened to the wind drag dry leaves across the street. Finally, she broke the silence. "You won't get an apology, but you'll get distance. That's something." I nodded. I don't need them to say sorry. I just needed them to stop rewriting my life like I wasn't in it. She gave a slow nod. "You took the pen back." After Camille left, I went inside and opened my old laptop, the one I hadn't touched since before all of this started. I figured it was time to clean things out, close files, delete noise. While backing up the last few folders, I noticed something labeled House Legal. I clicked it open out of habit, expecting old PDFs I'd already archived. But inside was a subfolder with screenshots and scanned documents Melis had uploaded. Emails with my name, the original deed, statements from the mortgage company, even a copy of the renovation contract. It wasn't an accident. She knew. All along. She hadn't been misinformed. She hadn't been confused. She had just been waiting, betting I wouldn't do anything, that I'd sit still and let it happen. That discovery didn't make me angry. It didn't even surprise me. It just clarified something I'd been circling around for months. Melis wasn't careless. She was patient, manipulative. She played the long game. And she thought I wouldn't have the nerve to flip the board. I closed the laptop, unplugged it, and slid it back into the drawer. Then I walked through the house, not to look for something, but just to see what already belonged to me. The hallway, the guest room I'd painted blue, even though my mother hated the color. The window trim I'd sanded by hand. The cabinet handles I'd installed late one night when sleep wouldn't come. All mine. Later that evening, as dusk crept in and the houses across the street began to glow with holiday lights, I lit a single candle on the mantel and placed the photo Camille gave me in a wooden frame. It sat beneath a small arrangement of books and a ceramic vase I'd bought years ago from a roadside market. The kind of thing you forget is beautiful until it's placed just right. I didn't look at the photo again. I didn't need to. The house didn't feel heavy anymore. It didn't ache like it had before. It felt honest. Still. Mine. The next morning, I opened the mailbox and found a thin envelope from the city's property records office. Inside was a formal notice. Melis had filed a change of address. No goodbye, no text, no letter. Just gone. There was no satisfaction in it. No smug smile. Just peace. Because while they left with the stories they'd built around themselves, I stayed with what actually mattered. The truth. My name. And a silence that didn't come from being shut out, but from finally closing the door myself. They had spent years trying to erase me quietly, but I had found my place in the story, framed it, and moved on. I used to believe that silence made me strong, that if I just stayed quiet, kept the peace, gave more than I got, maybe, just maybe, they'd see me. But I've learned that sometimes silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's erasure, and standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean screaming. It can mean drawing a line, gently but firmly, and refusing to move it again. You don't need revenge to win. Sometimes the greatest victory is living in truth, even if you're the only one who knows it. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or like your worth only existed when you were useful, know this: your story matters, even if they never admit it, and you have the right to take up space in your own life. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? Have you ever been written out of someone else's story, only to find the strength to write your own? If this story resonated with you, leave a comment with 1 to let me know I'm not alone. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story has traveled. And if this video didn't quite hit for you, I still want to hear from you. What part didn't land? What would you do differently? Most of all, if you believe in stories that heal, challenge, and reflect real life, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. That way, you won't miss the next story. Who knows? It might be the one that finds you exactly when you need it most. Thank you for being here. Until next time.